My name is Nico Sigler, and I'm the Deputy Clerk for the City of Bloomington. In 2019, the Clerk's office was given historical items from the Bloomington Fire Department to archive. These items included pictures and documents that went as far back as the 1920s. At the time, I had no archival experience and decided to call the Monroe County History Center for some help with this project. They turned out to be an invaluable resource and helped me so much with getting this done. While going through the documents and pictures, I realized this was not just a history of the fire department, it was also a history of Bloomington. So I decided to interview a few people about the things I had discovered through archiving everything we were given. I interviewed Tim Richards, a 37-year veteran of the Bloomington Fire Department, Mayor Tommy Allison, Mayor John Hamilton, and Fire Chief Jason Moore. I'm honored to have been given this opportunity, and I hope you enjoyed the interviews. What made you want to be a firefighter?
That's an easy one. I was a young man, up to 9 years old. My mother sent me to the corner grocery store to pick up some potatoes, and told me to get back in a hurry. And I was standing on the corner, came out of the store, and there was a little narrow firehouse across from the market. And the fire in town went off, and the next thing I know, these guys are flying in on their pickup trucks, and they ran into the firehouse, and the doors flew open, and out came a fire engine screaming up Main Street. I was like, that's got to be the coolest job in the world. I got goosebumps. And as kids will do, I wanted to see where it went. Ran up the street, and there was a big fire in a barn. And I stayed there a lot longer than I should have. And when I got home, they were a little mad at me because they thought I got kidnapped or something. And from that day on, I thought, that's what I was going to seek as a career.
Wow. What year would you say that was?
It was around 65, 66. I was 8 or 9 years old. And from that day on, I thought, this is the job I was born to do. I could never imagine doing anything else.
Wow. How old were you when you started?
I went in the Army at 18 to be a firefighter. And I spent 3 years as a firefighter crash rescue specialist there. And for the next year and a half, I put applications in, and I finally hooked up here. I moved here in '79 and got a job here on January 7th, 1980.
What kind of technological improvements or procedural improvements have you seen going from back when you started to around the time then?
I think the biggest thing is the gear.
Okay.
It's changed so much. We used to have a canvas or a rubber coat, pull-up hip boots, and a really light helmet that protected you from water and ashes and embers, but was not as good as the ones they wear today. They're a lot more safe. But firefighters in those days didn't wear air masks. When I came on, nobody wore an air tank. They wanted to get in there quickly and knock the fire down, and then go out and take a breather from the smoke, and the next guy would take his place on the line. You could ride on a tailboard back then, which was quite dangerous, but it was of necessity because that's where all the hose came off, the back. And
the tailboard. What's the tailboard?
Well, the tailboard was that place on the back of the engine, that flat spot on the back of the fire engines. And years past that, you could ride back there, and that's where the hose would come off. You would ride back there, and it was quite dangerous, if you hit a bump or something, and a lot of firefighters fell off. But at one time, fire engines only had a place for the driver and the captain, and others rode, on the tailboard. You would get up there, rain, wind, shine, it didn't matter. You held onto that bar back there, and in the winter it was cold, and in the summer it was kind of nice. It was like being in a convertible. But around 1985, nationally, I think they made firefighters, stop doing that.
Okay.
To keep from getting injured. But and then, the alarm systems are different now. You get a little bit more information, and it's a lot better in that respect. Training, we did a lot of training, but the training's so much more in depth now. It's really gotten farther ahead. In those days, firefighters concentrated on fires, and they go by what they called the Ohio State Manual, and it showed how to raise ladders and the different hose lays and firefighting techniques. And since the fire department covers so many different things now, extrications, chemical fires, So many different things that the training's a lot more in depth, and it makes them safer on the job. The gears improve so much. Air tanks were made mandatory here around 1989, which was a good thing. Mm-hmm. And when young firefighters like myself realized I could go places the others couldn't without them, you could go much deeper into the fire. So that helped, starting to wear those, and so many different changes like that. Engines have become bigger. They carry a lot more equipment, and those are some of the things that have changed quite a bit in those years.
What was the most memorable experience, and most memorable fire experience for you?
Yeah, well, it was April 27th, 1981. I was working out of Station 2 about a year and a half, or a year and a quarter on the job. And we've been busy that day. We've been up to the square a couple times for calls. And Station 2 had been out 3 or 4 times that day, about 6, 7 times total. And the other firefighters were playing cards up there, and I was watching at about 11 o'clock at night. And a call came in for an electrical fire at the town cinema. It was a movie theater that sat on the corner of 7th and Walnut. And I remember myself, Captain Roger Zink, Ron Brenniger was the other firefighter, and Richard Sexton was the sergeant. He was the driver. He later became a fire chief for about a year. And we were leaving the station, and Ron Brenniger looked at me and he said, sooner or later the law of averages is going to catch up with us. And I couldn't hear much radio chatter, but everybody seemed to be pretty excited. And we crossed 6th Street. You could see smoke banking down in the street, and it was a 3-story, what we call an ordinary construction, brick and wood joist, very old building. It had suffered fires in 1941. It had a serious fire. And in 1975, so it was already weakened in a lot of respects, the roof area, and joist, timber roof joist. But so we came down Washington Street the wrong way from 6th, and I took a hydrant up there at the corner of 7th and Washington. I had a line of sight to the building on that side, and just as I made the hydrant hook up, one of the windows blew out and just showered glass in the street. Fire roared out of there, and I remember getting pretty excited, thinking, wow, this is a real job. This is my first big job in a commercial structure. And turned the hydrant on when they were ready for water. And firefighter Dave Moore and I went up the outside fire escape and made entry on the 3rd floor. It was in the projection booth, and they couldn't get to it. The whole front of the building and the 3rd floor was on fire. And there was Dave Moore, myself, Acting Battalion Chief Bill Headley, Metro Forrest, he's deceased now, Dale Taylor, he's passed on, and a couple firefighters up on the 3rd floor there, and 5 of them were out on the mezzanine area, and Dave and I were in one of the apartments on the 2nd floor. Pieces of plaster would start falling. You could look up through there and just see the fire roaring. You just couldn't get to it. And the snorkel started putting water on it. It's an articulating boom. It's a truck. And they started putting water on the roof, but unfortunately the water built up. And a lot of plaster started falling, and the building started shaking. And Freddie Matthews and Ron Brenniger we were inside, and they went up the fire escape. And they were running a lineup in there. And the next thing I know, I'll never forget it, the trusses on the one end started falling. It sounded like a locomotive. The roof started to collapse. And I'll never forget the look on Bill Headley's face. He said, get out, get the hell out. His eyes were real big. So everybody went to the center and started down the stairs, which were right in the center of the building. And that whole roof collapsed, and the only place the debris didn't fall in was that stairwell everybody was in. We all fell down the stairwell. Ron Brenniger and Freddie Matthews were still on the fire escape, and they said they could look down and see that whole wall, that brick wall, swaying. If it had fallen into the street, and they probably would have been killed or seriously injured. And everybody made it out. I think Dale had a broken rib or something, but we all made it out of the building. And most firefighters know fires in movie theaters and bowling alleys, anything with a large open expanse like that never turns out well if you get caught in one. But it was a miracle. It was a miracle nobody got killed. And I remember standing in the street thinking, man, you know, a person could get killed doing this job. So it was a real awakening. And it got me to start thinking about learning a lot more about building construction. I'll never forget that.
I brought you in because while I was going through the pictures and newspaper clippings that Tim Richards had given me, I found you to be in quite a bit of them, actually. Specifically, the first one I saw was you in this.
Yes, that's Linda Runkle, besides Fleener, the fire chief. And that was our first boom truck. And that was because of Indiana University with their tall buildings. At that time, Indiana University was the only one that had the tall buildings. And we didn't have a boom truck. And that we worked out an arrangement with Indiana University about the cost, and we got it. So that particular day, now I didn't jump at the chance of getting into this, but I wasn't going to give up the chance of getting in that, and we did go all the way up.
Nice.
Yeah, that was great. It was actually quite fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't scary because it was very steady and all. It was very steady.
So that's awesome. So that's the first time we actually had something like this in Bloomington.
Yes. And it was definitely needed because a fire in the upper floors, there wasn't much that you could do immediately.
I guess that brings me right to, what kind of initiatives, projects, or policies did you implement regarding the Bloomington Fire Department besides the truck? Was there anything else that you got involved with the fire department?
Yes, in fact, this station itself was our first project. Now, I need to do a little background for you.
Okay.
The fire service, the parks, the streets, there were a lot of very definite infrastructure needs. And the reason that previous mayors had not taken care of that is that in Indiana, our ability to raise money locally is governed by the state. And communities like Bloomington, that was growing very fast, were locked into a slow way of raising money. You could only raise a certain amount of tax, a percent of tax each year. You were restricted in every way you tried to look for a way, and yet if your population was booming, your needs of infrastructure were booming and stuff like that, you were in a very impossible situation to meet the needs. Okay, so my coming into office and my administration, a great deal of our effort was in finding money. Okay. Yeah. And we had creative comptrollers. We had, and so this was our first lease purchase building.
Wow.
Okay. And but that was the only way we could meet the needs. And remember, the fire station was so small and so old, and it wasn't just the need for one station, it was a need for several stations,
Wow.
So, I mean, but this was, and this was a novel way for this government to meet that infrastructure need. Now, and there were other tasks which you may not be all interested in, but I mean, a great deal of effort, and I do mean time and energy, was put in to getting tax increases, to use whatever was available to meet the infrastructure needs of the community.
So what were some of the more memorable events then during your time as mayor that involved the fire department? Any sort of issues?
Well, actually, and there probably are some pictures on this one too, but when the theater downtown burned, was I think I was in office a very short time before that happened. And that was in the middle of the night. Well, it was in the night anyway. I mean, it went all through it was, anyway, the old theater on Walnut. It had not being used as a theater anymore, and had a rental up above, and fire started in one of those rentals, and it just was just like I guess all the stuff that they had in there, it just went immediately. It was a very dangerous situation for our firefighters. The firefighters had tried to go up the steps to try to do something, were actually blown back by the fire down the steps. And so it was, and for me, that was quite a shocking and event. You know, it was such a fire that was so fast, and it just, you know, it was a terrible fire.
Yeah, so the building was lost then, right? Like
yes, the building was lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, you know, it wasn't discovered and reported. So, you know, those way they would enclose those things, you know, it couldn't be seen until it was really just going. Now, nobody was hurt in this fire. In terms of, they must not have been renting at the time in there. You know, it probably was, you know, it was because there wasn't anybody there. But boy, was that a thing to see.
Yeah, so bring you in because I know in your first term, you did a lot for the fire department. You talked about all the increases you did to their funding and things like that. But I wanted to get more into the specifics of what you did for them, both for the department and for the firefighters. What exactly did you?
Well, you know, we have worked really hard in the first term to improve the fire department. There were several things we did. One, kind of thinking about the firefighters themselves. There were things I didn't know until I came in. One was that firefighters had to buy their own safety gear when I came into the department. They had an allowance that was given to each of them each year, and they were responsible to buy their gear, the fire protection gear. I thought that was unusual, and we talked about it and realized, first of all, it's kind of a bad incentive because, one, it means if you don't upgrade your gear, you can save a little money. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if you do upgrade your gear, it costs you personally money. So there's kind of bad incentives there. Then I also learned that, I didn't know this, at a fire, for example, or an accident scene, if you get petroleum on your suit, you have to replace it.
Wow.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
So you got like guys at an accident scene saying, well, whose suit's in the worst shape, ready to get ruined, and I'll go do this. And you're like, we don't want our firefighters thinking about that.
Yeah.
So one of the big things we did was we put in place a quartermaster system where the fire department buys 2 sets of gear for every firefighter. We pay for it, we clean them, we take care of them, and there's no reason for any firefighter to worry about, oh my gosh, if I go into this scene, am I going to cost myself money? Because I don't want to think of it. So that was one change. Another things I learned, some of the firehouses didn't have good ventilation systems, so the engines starting up in the garage would leak into their sleeping quarters. Now, it wasn't killing anybody, it wasn't that bad, but it was like, why are we having that? So we put in exhaust systems, and then a third thing, I mean, all these were kind of quality of life and quality of service. There was a new alarm system that had been put in to improve services, and the new alarm system meant we have 5 different firehouses, and the old system meant if fire station 2 was getting alerted, we didn't wake up fire station 5 in the middle of the night. They were sleeping because you needed 2s, and you let them know. If there's a big fire, you let everybody know. The new system actually was waking everybody up for every call, and I was like, "Are you kidding?" So multiple times in the night, when a firefighter is just trying to grab some rest, they would be awakened for something they didn't need to be awakened for. So changing that system was big. So those were just some of the stuff for the kind of the daily life of the firefighters. And then equipment was a big challenge. I actually did a ride-along early in my service, and did a ride-along, and twice on the way to a fire with the
that wasn't a fire, it was a call that didn't turn out to be a fire, but twice on the way with the sirens running, going down Atwater, the engine cuts off in the fire. I'm like, what? Coasts, and it's an electrical thing, and they know how to deal with it and start it back up. But it's like, that feels kind of not good. You know, your cars are getting out of your way. You're zooming down to get to this call, and the engine cuts out. So we had equipment that was too old. We had equipment that one of the big ladders got stuck with a guy up there, and really dangerous stuff.
Wow.
So we've done a lot to replace the equipment.
That's good. That's good. Wow, I didn't know about that. That's unfortunate. How long was that thing doing that? Did you ask them how long they'd been
look, one of the things we've done a lot to invest in infrastructure, and the county is now imposed on ourselves a 25-cent public safety tax, which helped us buy the engines, replace the equipment, improve the stuff. We now we try to do a regular cycle of an engine is in service for 7 years, and then it's a backup for 7 years. And kind of get into that rhythm so that we can use the machinery well. But there are some other things we did. For example, you probably know, the vast majority of what firefighters respond to are not fires.
Yeah.
They're car crashes, and they're health issues, and medical difficulties, and accidents, all kinds of stuff like that. But for every one of those, we send out a big fire engine. So one of the other things we did right at the beginning a few years ago was say, well, could we try something else? So we developed with the management here, the leadership of the fire department, a quick response vehicle. It's called a QRV, which is basically an SUV. It's a much smaller vehicle, 2 people on it instead of 4. And we're now developing this system so that the dispatchers know, hey, this doesn't need a full fire truck. It's not a big car accident that may have fuel or danger or others, or maybe it's a slip and fall and we just need EMT to help somebody there. So we're trying to save those engines too from getting run, constantly for things they don't need to be sent to. And then I'll give credit to the firefighters themselves. They've dramatically increased their training. They're tracking it, and they're 5 times as much, I think, training, really improving their training.
Awesome.
They're doing a 1 hour a day physical exercise regimen to improve their health. We're doing annual physicals, which we didn't do. So I'm really proud the department's improving. They're moving up the accreditation scale to the top level, and that's really good to see.
That's great. And do you have any future plans or projects regarding the fire department or anything going on?
Well, yes. I mean, fire departments are always changing. They've been changing for over a century, and as we said, a lot of ways what a fire department most wants to do is not have to respond to fires.
Yeah.
We've had 3 years in a row with 0 fatalities in the city from fires. I'm really proud of that. And they've actually had 8 or 9 life saves of people. I think the fire department is moving up the scale of ratings from a 2 to a 1 to the top rating. So we're looking forward to seeing that. That's not done, but I think it's in the way. I think continuing to look at how do we do a better job of preventing fires. So we're trying to inspect everybody more often to make sure we find out where risk of fire is. I think continuing to think about, the use of equipment, like these big, expensive, heavy, low miles per gallon trucks, you don't want running around the city all the time that you don't need to. And so thinking about being more flexible in how we deploy is important. I think coordinating with other medical teams is important. I even think, firefighters, one of the things I did do was allow firefighters to use their equipment, not just to have it sit in the garage all day, but actually also to use it in training runs and around the community so more people see them. I think figuring out how the fire department interacts more intensively and frequently to help avoid fires, to help, heck, it could be even dealing with shut-ins and dealing with people who are at risk of medical calls, that we can be helpful in that. So I think fire departments are really going to look a lot different probably in 20 or 30 years than they do today, and so we're trying to figure out how to get there.
That's awesome. So you were in the military and became a firefighter. Which branch were you in?
I was in the Air Force for 5 years.
5 years. And you were a firefighter the whole time?
Yes.
So what would you say were the differences between being an Air Force firefighter versus being a firefighter for...
So the biggest thing is Air Force firefighting is mainly focused on the aircraft. So the ARF, aircraft rescue firefighting, it's a very fast-paced type of firefighting. If you can imagine, basically the equivalent of a mobile home loaded up with jet fuel.
Okay.
So you don't have a lot of time to deal with fires. But we also did cover structures on the base. So really the biggest difference is that military bases are extremely safety oriented. So have alarm systems, have sprinkler systems, and here in the city we don't have that everywhere. So we never really know what we're walking into. I'd say the only difference I had is that I was focused on the aircraft, and then that the buildings are not as well known or as safe as what they are in a military installation.
Okay, and so were you able to then, because of your training, were you able to just apply for a firefighter's job in the public and just get it with no training, or were they still had extra stuff you needed to do?
So my very first job outside the military was as a firefighter for Moncks Corner City, and the chief there was former Air Force, and I got on very minimal training about their equipment, their gear, and then went straight to work. So
wow.
Really, the DoD does a really good job of preparing you, certification and training-wise. But a lot of municipalities will want you to do some kind of extra training to learn their municipality, their issues, their way of doing things. So I've worked for several municipal departments since the Air Force, and I've also done an international contractor job as well, which was another interesting step in my world. That was only aircraft rescue, and that was in a war zone. So,
oh wow,
it was an interesting step. But I've been a captain in the Charleston area. I was hired as a captain. So the military does a really great job of certifications and training. And throughout my years of being in the military and then civil service afterwards, I had all the necessary skills and experience to be a captain in a municipal department.
Okay. So what has been your most memorable fire experience? And it doesn't have to be Bloomington, although if it happens to be in Bloomington, but throughout your 20 years, most memorable fire for you?
I would have to say, like most firefighters, it's my first one. Here in Bloomington, I've been to several of our fires, and the largest was a carpet store on the west side. But really it's your very first fire that kind of sticks with you the most. After doing it for 20 years, a lot of them become a blur unless there was a rescue or a loss. There's always lessons learned, but for me it was my very first fire. It was a kitchen fire in a base house duplex. It was nothing really big. I just remember the adrenaline and the excitement of not knowing what I'm going into, and this is the first time that this is real, not a training environment.
Did you, since it was just a kitchen, was anyone in the building or anything?
Everybody got out. In fact, we rescued 2 pets that were at the front door when we first got there. Went right in, put the fire out. And like I said, it wasn't the biggest fire I've ever been in. It wasn't the worst fire I've ever been in. There was no loss, but it was the first, and that kind of sticks with the firefighter as your very first fire. And
that was in the military, right?
Correct.
All right. And so, what kind of future plans do you have for the fire department going forward?
Really, it's focusing and continuing on the employee safety and then the citizen safety, but it's also continuing to look on how to be more innovative. We've already done things like putting in a small unit, small vehicle for rescue calls and EMS calls, but really it's just trying to be better at what we do. We've invested heavily in the education of our firefighters since I've been here with their training. So really we've got a really good plan, and we've already started executing that. So it's carrying out the rest of that plan, but it's also looking at things like accreditation. For those that don't know, the fire department accreditation process connects you with your community and gives the community the fire department they want. It's easy to chase national standards, and it's easy to do, based on best practice, but you can sometimes overgrow your department to what the community wants, or you could be underserving the community from what they want. So the accreditation process for us will have us evaluate all aspects of our department and engage with the community to make sure that we're meeting their expectations.